They laughed when the girl with sandals stitched from ribbons stood in a courtroom of marble and light and promised to heal the paralyzed judge. Her voice was steady, not loud, a small flame in a hall of wind. "Free my father, and I will make you walk." The bailiff coughed into his fist to hide a smile. The young lawyers whispered bets. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The Offer. Judge Harish Mehta, the man in the elevated chair, had once been a hurricane in courtrooms, quick, clean, and impossible to bribe. Since the accident 2 years ago, he sat low in a wheelchair, a blanket over his lap even in summer. The heaviness below his waist had made his face lean and sharp, like all his weight had climbed into his eyes. He peered at the speaker. She was no taller than his desk and as thin as a worry. Hair braided tight, a white cotton kurta that had been mended at the elbows in neat, stubborn stitches. In her knuckles, the skin had cracked from soap and winter. "What did you say?" His voice was dry. Even in paralysis, he still had a judge's tone, each word an iron placed on rumpled cloth. "Free my father," the girl repeated, as if dictating a letter she'd written many times in her head. "And I'll heal you. I know how to make your toes remember. I know how to make a body that forgot. Listen." Someone laughed, a young lawyer. Another smirked, a man with his tie too tight, his mouth full of the city's old cruelty. The judge's clerk, Bina, looked hard at the floor. The sound threaded the hall. Laughter always knows how to find its way into places it doesn't belong. "There will be no bargaining in this court," Judge Mehta said. The words were reflex, not feeling. He drew the blanket over his knees, a small gesture, defensive, like a man passing through a cold wind. He wanted to dismiss her the way he dismissed 100 theatrics every week. "I'm not bargaining," the girl said. "I'm promising, and I'm telling you the truth." "And you are Asha Raghu." The name came with a silence. Someone, somewhere, made a small sound as if a pin walked across a tabletop. Raghu was the last name of the man the city had decided to hate, the night watchman who'd been charged with setting fire to the Sheth Textiles warehouse and taking 6 lives with it, including 2 boys who had fallen asleep beside a loom. He was days away from sentencing. "The court is not the place for your promises," Mehta said, but something in his throat changed on the last word. He had sentenced many men. Some had cried, some had stared as if trying to memorize the face of their jailer. But this girl had come with a wild proposal, cheap magic, the kind that made the room electric, not because anyone believed her, but because they wanted to watch belief die. "Come into my chamber," he said abruptly, surprising himself. "Alone." The laughter choked on itself and swallowed back down. People knew the judge wasn't a man for pity. If he was bringing her into his chamber, it was because something inside him was twitching. Ashan nodded once, eyes steady. Her sandals whispered on the marble as she followed him. Chapter 2. The girl who had heard nerves sing in the judge's chamber. There were photographs of men he had admired, and one of his mother, her eyes proud and a bit sad. There was a wall of books that smelled, even in the heat, like rain. "You can't ask me to break the law for you," the judge said. "Even if you could dance me back onto my feet, I could not make a man walk out of a sentence because of it." Asha looked at the books, at the judge's hands, hands that still moved with precision. "My mother used to say that law is a machine that can grind grain or bone depending on who runs it, but she also said the law can listen. She was a nurse. She taught the nervous system like a story. She would put her ear to my calf and say, 'Every muscle has a song.' She taught me to listen for it." "You are a nurse?" "I borrow books from the hospital library," she said, not precisely answering. "I watched videos on a broken phone. I fixed the neighbor's old television and watched doctors move their hands like they were conducting the wind. I helped Mr. Bala from our alley move his fingers again after a stroke." She paused. "I'm not asking you to break the law. I'm asking you to not let it break my father instead of breaking whoever set the fire. I'll heal you for free because I want something to be true again. If you can allow his case to breathe before it dies, I will do everything I know to make your legs hear themselves." Her words scraped against some rusted place inside the judge. He had seen too many desperate people play the court like a stage, crying, fainting, offering everything from jewels to gods. No one had offered him healing. No one had sounded like they knew what to listen for. "What happened to your mother?" Asha's fingers curled into her palms. The night of the fire, she was volunteering at the factory clinic. She did that sometimes when someone cut a hand on the machines or when the night shift smelled like sickness. She never came home. The judge's face twitched as if someone had touched a nerve. The night of the fire, the night before his crash, his car had been hit, a ricochet of metal and light, his blood a red mask on his face. He had woken to a white ceiling and a pair of hands holding his shoulders down against the panic. The memory fluttered and settled, a wounded bird. "I can't," he began, then stopped. "Leave your number with my clerk. I'll ask the hospital for records for an opinion." "You can ask all the hospitals," she said softly. "They will tell you that your injury is incomplete. That movement is not impossible. They will tell you to work hard and wait. They will also tell you there is no guarantee. I am not a guarantee. I am a try." Her eyes in that moment were not the eyes of a beggar. They were the eyes of a builder looking at a pile of rubble and seeing a house. "When?" he said. "Today, now." "Now," he almost laughed, a sound he hadn't made in months. "If we wait, someone else will put their thumb on the scale," she said. "And you will say, the law must do what it must, and my father will say goodbye to the son. Please, let me show you one thing." He stared at her. If this was a con, it was a strange one. If this was faith, it was a dangerous kind. He felt that knowledge moved through him like smoke. "Bina," he called, and when the door opened, he said, "Ask the driver to bring my chair in here." Bina's eyebrows arched. The judge did not allow anyone to see him moved, not even her. Today, he did. Chapter 3, the house of stone and air at his home later that evening. The judge consented to 1 hour, then to 2. He had once lived with his work like a marriage. Now, pain had become his second spouse, every movement negotiated, every refusal sulking in a corner. Asha arrived with a rucksack that was too small for the courage it carried. She took off her sandals at the door without anyone asking. The housekeeper, Lada, watched her with a mixture of pity and curiosity, as if seeing a stray pup who had wandered into a palace. "What do you have in there?" the judge asked. "String, bells, a red scarf, a metronome, tin plates, a mirror, and a toy," she said, and pulled out a small orange car with a pull-back motor. "For laughter, it helps." "I don't laugh," he said. "Then you haven't healed," she replied matter-of-factly. They set up in the wide room with the black and white floor. Asha wrapped the red scarf around one of his knees, then around her own calf. "I'm going to move," she said, "and your body is going to mirror mine. It is going to pretend until it remembers it knows how. Neurons that fire together wire together. They are stubborn and vain. They like to be told something is happening, and then they make it true." He almost told her he was a judge, not a patient. He almost told her to be less certain. But he was tired of weak hands on his ankles, therapists who had watched the clock tremble with every second. He watched her instead. Asha hooked bells, gungru, tiny silver notes along her own shin. She tied string from his toe to hers. She placed the mirror where he could see her leg, and between the mirror and his body, a second mirror that fractured light so that it looked like 2 legs moving when there was only one. "Look at the mirror," she said. Her voice softened like butter in a warm pan. "Look at the me who is you." It was preposterous. It was childish. It was so tender he had to look away. "Please," she said. He looked. She tapped the bells in a rhythm, tick, 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 pause, tick, 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 pause. She moved her foot, her ankle, moved slowly and with dignity. He stared at the mirror where a stranger's leg, no, his own reflected other self, moved as if attached to him. He felt nothing. "Now imagine that when I move, you are actually moving and I am the copy," she instructed. "Imagine your knee has a small door and your thoughts are keys. Come on, sir, open." He snorted. It was too much. But his mind, that faithful demon, did as it was told. It imagined. It imagined unlocking. It imagined the way his limb had once felt as ordinary as air. And then, like the first raindrop hitting a balcony, the faintest tremble touched his ankle. It was not a thing that someone else would have noticed. But he knew every inch of his lost kingdom. He swallowed. The tremble came again, then wandered away like a child who had walked into the wrong room. Ashad did not gasp. She did not give him the drama of a choir. She nodded, as if this had always been the plan. "Good," she murmured. Again. They worked until the light slipped off the walls and the room turned that blue that belongs to sorrow and dusk. The toy car sat on the floor, unused. The bells kept time. The judge's only sound was his breath, which had learned to climb to the roof and then descend without breaking. Once, in the middle of a sequence, Lada snuck a look and made a sound she couldn't swallow. "Sahib," she whispered, tears fattening. It moved. "They laughed at me," Ashas said to no one. They can keep their laughter. It's poor people's music. We dance to it. They laughed, Judge Maida said, and the words tasted of something that might one day be a smile. Chapter 4, The Family of Pain in the Days That Followed, the judge allowed her back. He told no one at first, not even his driver, who muttered about schedules. Asha came with her bag of improbable devices and instructions that sounded like nursery rhymes and medical textbooks had gotten married. "Why do you care about my legs?" he asked one afternoon, when the weather had made his bones mean. "Because I need your mind," she said. "Your legs are the door into your mind. If we only talk about the case, you will feel like a judge and I will feel like a defendant. But if we make your body do something it believes impossible, then your mind might follow. And maybe it will listen to me when I tell it my father is not guilty." "You're manipulative," he said. "So are you," she replied. "That's why you make people tell the truth. The truth can be shy." He winced because that was precisely his master trick, pull truth out of people like thread. He told her in unguarded minutes about his son who did not speak to him, who had moved away after calling him a tyrant, a man married to rules. He told her about the night of the crash, a moment blank as a shut eye. He told her about the hospital's ceiling and the doctor who had said the spinal cord was bruised, not cut. Asha did not gawk. She wore his confession like a shawl quietly. In return, Asha told him about hunger as a roommate, about learning the value of boiled water, about the work of keeping things clean when everything wants to rot. She told him about her mother's hands, which could close a wound with 3 rhythmic stitches. She told him about Raghu, who had a sailmaker's forearms and an easy laugh, who had become silence in a prison corridor. "The night of the fire," she said, "my father had argued with the supervisor because the wiring was hot to the touch. They told him to shut up. He called the safety inspector, who owes his life to the same owners. He got arrested before the ash cooled." "You will need evidence," the judge said. "Evidence is the only language the even moderately honest hear." She nodded. "I have a place to start." "What place?" "The truth." He nearly rolled his eyes. "Do better than that." She smiled, and the barest dimple ghosted one cheek. "I will." Chapter 5, The Ash That Clung There is a city within every city, the one that goes to work at night and trades secrets through chain-link fences. In that city, Asha was a citizen. She sought out Kabir, a friend of her late mother, a journalist with a hunger for stories and a belly that had grown with his compromises. "You know this will burn you," he warned. "They don't like anyone poking their fires." "I am already burned," she said. "Come and watch if you want to remember why you started writing about this place." They began from the warehouse and moved backward. She traced the path of the fire with her finger, reading the scorch marks on the walls the way her mother had taught her to read a rash. Here the heat had climbed, here it had hesitated, here it had become oxygen's twin. Someone had left a steel drum near an open breaker, a drum that had held solvent-labeled water-based paint to console inspectors. But the smell in its memory was not water. Kabir sniffed it and swore softly. "You think the owner? I think they made my father a match," Asha said. "He was only the hand." They met Sonia, who worked in HR and had eyes like coffee, dark, reflective, too tired. Sonia smoked silently and then told them, in a voice so tired it was brave, about overtime logged under names of dead men, salaries washed through ghost accounts, and a shipment that had not arrived but had been paid for conditionally, on proof that a catastrophic electrical failure had occurred. "You'll get me killed," she said, tears angry in her eyes. "We'll get you protected," Kabir lied, and then looked at Asha, who ignored the lie. She took notes like a steno, neat and fast. She took photographs with her phone, that miraculous chisel that turns time into something that can be stored. "DSB Lobo runs that precinct," Kabir said. "He's the kind of policeman who looks you in the eye when he lies." "Then we'll make him blink," Asha answered. Kabir published the first piece. It was soft, cautious, a question asked with a hand near the mouth. It mentioned contradictions and looked at the fire not as a big, tragic accident, but as a creature with intent. 3 days later, an unmarked man with a mustache too dark to be true followed Asha from the library to her home and leaned against the wall as if he owned it. "It's better to be poor than to be dead," he said conversationally. "My mother is already dead. My father speaks through a glass window. If you're trying to frighten me, you'll have to raise your rate." The man smiled without enjoyment and flicked his lighter. "Find God, little sister." "He can find me," Asha said and walked past him, Her hand shook so hard her key rang against the brass. Inside, she cried quietly for 30 seconds into the sink. Then she splashed water on her face and got to work. Chapter 6. The police who remembered to be people. Judge Maida asked for documents. He asked for logs. He asked for the coolness that facts bring. Behind every request was the knowledge of limits, the law's mercies. He could not swoop in, he could shape only the air. When Kabir's article landed, like a pebble in a river heavy with rocks, he received a call from DSP Lobo. "You interviewed an HR person without permission," Lobo said, not yet angry, still a man who holds anger like a club that can be polished. "Permission," Kabir echoed. "You know how this city works," Lobo said. "Don't pretend. I'm inviting you to the station. We'll have tea. We'll see if you're building a story or a coffin." Kabir did not go alone. Asha went with him, an invader in jeans and braid. Lobo looked at her and smirked. "You like to play doctor?" he asked. "I like to fix things," she said. "You could use someone like me." Lobo laughed genuinely. He offered them chai. He did not drink his, a cheerless man. He showed them the case file, which was too neat, too convenient, like a dress tailored for a corpse. "Your father was seen near the warehouse." "He worked there," Asha said. "He had a lighter." "He stopped smoking 2 years ago. My mother would have killed him for starting again." He had argued loudly with the supervisor. He argued about the wiring. The supervisor argued about losing his job. Who has more to lose? Lobo enjoyed this. He liked a fight that felt like chess. But when Asha pulled out a handwritten list, the names of the men Sonia said were ghosts. Lobo's smile fell as if it had been nailed to his face and the nails had been pulled. He told them to leave. On the sidewalk outside, Kabir exhaled smoke into the sky. "We can't make him do his job." "Yes, we can," Asha said, "by making him the man who didn't." She approached the judge the next day with a stack of paper and a bruise on her elbow she would not talk about. "You're bruised," he said, and his voice was more father than judge. "Something hit me," she shrugged. "It left. We are collecting." "We?" he asked. "The city," she said simply, and put the papers on his lap. "Sonia is ready to testify. She will sign an affidavit if you can promise she'll not be removed." "I cannot promise what is not within my power," he said, "but I can create a situation where removing her is very expensive." "Do that," Asha said, "while we move your ankles. You think I can be moved like a pawn." He joked. "You're not a pawn," she said seriously. "You're the king. You cosseted yourself so no one could touch you, but kings can be trapped too." He watched her, and for the first time he felt something like respect that wasn't tangled in condescension. She had a steel that came from washing her own dishes and putting little brothers to sleep. He envied it. He had always had servants to cushion the hard edges of the world. That evening, as they worked with the mirror and the bells, he felt his foot lift a whisper, so small it could have been imagined. He looked at her. She had seen it. He could tell. She did not say a word. Later, almost as an afterthought, she took the toy car and pulled it back. It clicked as it tightened. When she released it, the car darted across the floor like a cat. He laughed, a small bark, like a lonely man remembering a joke. Lada, hidden in the corridor, put both hands to her mouth and wept. They had laughed, all of them at the first day, but now their laughter felt different. It had loosened its cruelty. It had become relief wearing a silly mask. Chapter 7. The night of rain they came for Asha in wet weather. Rain made the city feel like a mouth full of teeth. 2 men grabbed her by the elbow outside Kabir's office, their fingers practiced. She fought like a cat, wild and unashamed. One of them slapped her, which was a mistake. Someone on the street threw a bottle. Someone else yelled. Suddenly, a small crowd replaced her fear with noise. The judge's driver, Ramesh, saw it and drove not toward the courthouse, but toward the fray. He had taken orders his whole life. This felt like a test from a different god. He pulled up alongside the men, honked until blood was in his throat, and shouted her name. She broke free in the confusion and ran to the car, a creature who chose more danger to escape immediate danger. Ramesh delivered her to the judge's house dripping and feral. She stood in his doorway, shaking rain from her hair like a dog. The judge looked at her and felt an urge to commit a crime on her behalf. He tamped it down. He had only ever allowed himself the crimes of neglect. "They came for me," she said, voice calm as a lake. "Yes," he said. His mouth was a tight line. "They always do." He called DSP Lobo on his personal phone. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He offered instead something Lobo knew the value of, a chance to be seen as right. He told him there was a witness at risk and that if harm came to her, he would hold a press conference. not a thing he had ever done, and name every officer who had touched the file. He hung up before Lobo could answer. "Why are you helping?" Asha asked when he put down the phone. "Because I would like to be a person again," he said simply, "and not only a gavel." After she left that evening, escorted home by Ramesh and two neighbors the judge had summoned with the authority of money and urgency, he sat in the dark and felt a sensation in his thigh that he had not felt in 2 years, the ghost of hunger in a muscle. He walked, not in the corridor of the world, but in the narrow alley of his mind, and found he could see a light at the far end. It was dim. It was enough. Chapter 8, Secrets. The accident that had broken him did not live in his mind as a scene. It lived as a hum. He had avoided the intersection where it happened as a man avoids the window of the ghost he loved. That night, restless, he asked Ramesh to drive him there. "Now?" Ramesh asked. Yes. They arrived at the crossing. Traffic threads the city like big, tangled necklaces. This one was knotted and bright. He looked at the spot where metal had taken him down and asked himself, like a lawyer, what was missing. He asked the night to testify. Then he saw it, a lamppost bent at its ankle, still bearing the scar like a badge. He remembered, no, he caught an image, a car too fast, a white hood, a sticker on the rear window shaped like a peacock. A voice in the crowd saying, "Sheth's car, run." He had not allowed this memory to speak. It spoke now. He called Bina at home. "Get me the traffic camera footage from that night," he said. "Sir, we asked." "Ask again. Ask louder. Ask from higher." Bina asked. "Someone sent a file they had no right to keep. In the footage it was clear, a white car clipped his and did not stop. It bore a sticker in the shape of a peacock. The license plate was blurred by rain and motion, but the shape of the grille was an expensive lie. He had just seen a peacock sticker in the garage at Sheth Textiles, the day he had gone to inspect the site of the fire. He had thought it a coincidence. He did not believe in coincidence anymore. He did not tell Asha. He felt the old urge to contain, to hold the knowledge like a snake until he could be sure it was venomous. In his dreams that night, he crawled, not with pain but with intent. Chapter 9, The Hearing. You cannot decide a case with a healed leg. You cannot. The law that is tender is no longer law. The judge recused himself from the sentencing hearing, citing personal reasons. He watched from the side, a man who had once worn a robe and now wore caution. A special bench was assembled. Sonia, trembling, signed her statement. Kabir published the second piece, braver this time, with names. DSP Lobo held a press conference in which his face learned restraint. He announced the arrest of the supervisor and a junior manager on charges of negligence and collusion. Vikram Sheth called it ridiculous, the defense of the guilty by the weak. The city split into two, those who loved the sound of the rich laughing and those who loved the sound of the poor refusing to. Asha had prepared a surprise. When called to speak as a family member requesting leniency, she did not beg. She opened her bag and took out the metronome and set it on the witness box and wound it until it began to tick. The courtroom wavered between amusement and contempt. "My mother used to time stitches to keep calm," she said, "to not sew her fingers to someone else's pain. I'm doing that now, so I don't sow my anger into your decision. I offer you this sound not to hypnotize you, but to remind you that sometimes it isn't the loud things that matter. It's the small ones that persist." The metronome beat time against the hubbub. Tick, tick, tick. The senior judge on the bench raised an eyebrow. "Miss Raghu, this is not a show." "Yes, sir," she said, and then proceeded to explain, clearly as if teaching schoolchildren, how electricity can be coaxed into fire but also protected, how a building files complaints by frying small appliances and making the lights dim, how the people who get blamed are usually the ones who don't own the alarm. She concluded with this: "I cannot heal steel beams, but I can help a leg remember. And I know when someone is lying because they want money. I know when someone is lying because they are afraid. And I know when someone in a chair is pretending to be powerless when they are not." If she had looked at Judge Mehta then, the look would have said everything. She didn't. She looked at the three men in black and waited. "Tick," said the metronome. The special bench ordered an independent forensic re-examination. They halted Raghu's sentencing and asked for a protection order for Sonia. DSP Lobo was assigned to the bench's elbow, a policeman pressed into unexpected integrity. Vikram Sheth called his lawyers his brothers and made faces on television. In private, he tore a painting from a wall and smashed it and told his nephew Rohit to run. When people saw Asha leaving the court, They laughed again, but with less certainty. "The poor get their spectacle and go home hungry," someone muttered. Asha heard it. She put the metronome in her bag and said under her breath, "We go home hungry and still we make music. That's the trick." Chapter 10. Until the judge had kept the footage of the white car in a private file. He had no jurisdiction over it anymore, he told himself. He had no right to crack it open. But when Asha came that evening and tied the bells and told him to look at the mirror and remember his knees, when the sense of a movement ghosted down into his calves, he felt the magnet pull of truth. "I have something to tell you," he said. His voice was a man tying a knot. "Me too," she said, surprising him. "You first." He showed her the footage. He told her about the sticker. He told her about the night that had broken his body like glass. She watched the shaky video on his tablet. When the white car flashed across the screen and ran, she made a small noise, a sound like grief falling from a height and landing on its feet. "My mother used to say that the city speaks in code," she murmured. "Peacocks don't belong on cars." He called Bina, who called a friend in the transport office who owed her a favor large and ugly. Within an hour, they knew the registered owner of the car, a front company. Within 4, they knew who drove it that night, Rohit Sheth. The room's air changed. It thickened. It became difficult to breathe politely. "You knew him," Asha said to the judge, as if accusing him of greed later expected to be forgiven. "You met him. You shook his hand." "I know his uncle," the judge said. He took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "I thought the crash was an accident. I didn't want to know. I had enough pain. Knowing is a second pain, but I suppose it was the first medicine." "There is a conflict here," he said, teeth tight. "I cannot." "You can," Asha said. "Not as a judge, as a person. You always tell other people that being a person is not enough." "Today it can be." He called Lobo. He told him what he had. He said he would testify to the chain that had delivered the footage. He said no names on the record that could tip anyone off. He felt, for the first time in years, the clean fear of doing something necessary and dangerous. Lobo cursed. Then he said, "I knew it. I knew it in my bones, and I did not want my bones to be right." The next morning, Rohit tried to leave town. He made it as far as the toll, where officers who answer to no one stopped him. He cried and called his uncle, who called everyone. "The city is full of doors, some opened. Not this time." A magistrate was woken and told to be brave. They laughed when the news spread that the Sheth nephew had been arrested. They laughed in chawls, in cafes, on bus steps. The laughter had teeth now. It bit. At the judge's house that afternoon, Asha set the bells around her ankle and asked him to place his feet flat on the floor. He did. She gave him a stick to hold. He held it. She put the metronome on a low table and its heart beat like a small animal's. "Today we try standing," she said. "They will laugh," he said. "Let them," she said. "They laughed when you sentenced men with hearts of granite. They laughed when I called my miracle a discipline. Today they can laugh while you stand." He looked at the mirror, at his reflected legs, at the world turning its face toward him. The room became a tunnel. He pushed down with his palms and his arms trembled. He planted his heel. Pain spoke. He listened. He lifted, ancient stone shifting under earth, a building remembering another city under it. His left knee locked. His right screamed. He felt the liquid, weak strain of muscles that have slept too long and been woken by an alarm they do not like. Bina put her hand on his back, not to lift, but to be there. Lada made a sound like a prayer. Asha counted in the weary, generous voice of women coaxing babies into the world. 1, 2, 3. He rose, not all the way, knees bent, back barking, eyes wet. He rose enough for the chair to feel his absence. From the corridor outside came a sound that had haunted his first day, laughter. One of the guards had told a joke, unaware of what was happening 2 doors away. The sound, bright and careless, reached them just as he pushed with 1,000 days of shame behind him. He rose until his thighs shook and his back was a line of nerves writing a poem no one could read. He stood. They laughed until the room fell quiet with the sound of feet meeting floor. Chapter 11. After the standing comes the walking. Standing is a door, you must still step to pass through it. The judge took 1 step that day, sideways, a crab scuttling along the edge of a new road. The next day he took 2. He fell once. He swore like a soldier. Asha held his anger like a rope and did not tug. He kept walking. Meanwhile, the city's other movement gathered momentum. Sonia's testimony led to a bank statement, led to an accountant, led to a server under a desk. The server held emails that wrote the story of a fire starting long before it did. DSB Lobo, to everyone's surprise, did not lose the thread in his own life. He chose to hold it and be dragged if needed. Kabir wrote pieces that were less gentle now. His hands shook when he published them, but there is a point after which cowardice tastes so bad you will never eat it again. Raghu was brought to court not in handcuffs, but in that special indignity where men are free to move but know that if they run, they will be made into something a crowd devours. Asha watched her father's face and saw a man who had learned to sleep sitting up. When he saw her at the back of the courtroom, he smiled the smallest smile, a seed of a smile. It made her want to break something and bury it. There was a twist the city liked less. The judge's son, whom he had not seen in a year, called after reading about Rohit. The son's voice had softened the way a boy's voice does when he becomes cruel, and then stops being cruel because he's tired. "I thought you'd die in that chair," he said. "I told myself I didn't care." "I did too," the judge said, "about you." There was a pause. "I want to come home," the son confessed, "not forever, not as a child, just as a person." "If I can be a person," the judge said, "you can too." Chapter 12. The verdicts we make. The special bench took weeks to decide because justice does not like to be rushed in public. Quietly, a consensus grew. The report named negligence, arson by arrangement, and attempt at fraud. It named men with very nice watches. It named Lobo, not as a villain, but as a man balanced on a fence who had stepped to one side. The day the verdict came, the sky was a lid. The judge wore a simple shirt. He had not put on his robe since he recused. He did not need a robe to feel heavy. The bench acquitted Raghu of arson and conspiracy. It named him a witness to negligence. It recommended charges against Vikram Sheth for fraud and against his nephew for vehicular hit and run and accessory to arson. Its censure ordered the safety inspectors for negligence. The words were heavy as coins in the city's mouth. Asha did not scream. She signed something. She sat on a bench outside the courtroom and held her bag as if it were a baby and cried a small, neat cry, like someone using only what they needed. Raghu came out with a paper that was a key and went straight to his daughter. He did not say sorry. He did not say, "How did you do this?" He said, "Let's go home," which was both a command and a prayer. She nodded. They went. At dusk, there was a knock at the judge's door. He opened, leaning on a cane now because he was proud. A man with full hair and eyes like time stood with Asha. The man's hands were bandaged from years of work. He smelled like smoke, not because he had been near a fire, but because the fire had been near him too long. "Sir," Raghu said and put his hand on his chest and bowed. "Thank you for standing." "I cannot take credit," the judge said. "This was your daughter." Then, after a pause, he added, "I stood because she refused to let me sit." Asha laughed softly. "It didn't need me, it needed you." "No," he said. "It needed you." He turned to Raghu. "I'm resigning." "What?" Asha said, startled. "I helped fix something I had allowed to break. I cannot rule again the way I have known myself," he said. "I need to walk as a citizen for a while. The law will continue without me. I would like to teach. To remind young people that the words we find are verbs. They do things to people. They should be spoken by someone who knows what standing costs." Asha stared at him for a long time, then nodded as if the pillars of the world had arranged themselves slightly differently, and she approved. "They'll laugh," Raghu said, not unkindly. "At a judge who leaves. They laughed at me when I was paralyzed," the judge said. "They laughed when your daughter promised me legs. They laughed until I stood." He walked them to the gate. The child from next door, who had been watching everything all along like a small god, ran up to Asha. "Diddy," she said, "can you make me walk like him?" "You can already walk," Asha said, ruffling her hair. "Like him," the child insisted and lifted her chin, imitating the small, stubborn tilt of the judge's head. They all laughed, not to shame, but to celebrate. Epilogue. The clinic under the tamarind tree. They found a building with peeling paint and a tamarind tree whose branches wrote shade onto the dirt. Asha put up a hand-painted sign, "The Listening House." She taught exercises to women who stood all day and to men who knelt too long. She had a drawer of bells and a shelf of mirrors. Children came to play with the orange car. She let them. Judge Mehta came twice a week and sat in a chair that had once been something else, maybe a throne, from the way he sat. He taught law students about evidence as story and story as evidence. He told them to keep their wrists strong and their hearts suspect. He walked a little better each month. He still fell sometimes. he still stood. DSB Lobo visited on Sundays. He brought sweets that made everyone's teeth ache and apologized awkwardly to the city by being visibly human. Kabir wrote a small book whose only fame was that it was true. Sonia moved to a village near the sea and started a grocery store where she weighed spices with a gravity that made customers comfortable. Vikram Sheth hired the most expensive lawyers and wept on television. His trial took years because rich people know how to unspool time. Rohit married and then divorced a woman who discovered that money cannot gild rot. The city, which has many appetites, sometimes forgot the fire, except when a man walked past with a limp that was not pain but history. One evening, when a new moon hung low like the bruise of the sky's own finger, the judge came alone. The clinic was quiet. Asha was putting the chairs up on tables, sweeping the floor. He watched her for a second, the economy of her motion, the way she had learned to do in 5 minutes what others took an hour to. "I want to tell you something," he said. She leaned on the broom. "What?" "Thank you," he said, and then, because gratitude is never quite enough, "I would have died sitting down." She put the broom aside. "I nearly died standing up, that's the deal." He nodded. "I thought healing meant escaping pain. I see now that it means choosing pain that pays you back." They stood under the tamarind and listened to the city gulping in air. After a while, Raghu arrived, late from a new job fixing awnings. He wiped his hands on his trousers and smiled like a candle that refused to be snuffed. Asha took out the toy car. She pulled it back. It clicked, storing its small energy. She released it and watched it dart and stop at the toe of the judge's shoe. He bent without thinking and picked it up. "You didn't even notice," she said, delight flaring on her face. "What?" he asked, absent. "You reached," she said. "It used to be a mountain, now it's a step." He looked at his hand at the toy at her. "I suppose that's the miracle." "No," she said. "The miracle is that the step took you somewhere." He started visiting the graveyard more where his wife was, where Asha's mother had been laid on a beautiful, unpretentious afternoon when the sky had pretended it was just any other day. He spoke to the stones about the weight of laughter, about how it can be a weapon, a song, a window opening. He spoke about how one girl had stood in his court and proposed a trade he could not legally take, and how in refusing it he had taken it anyway, because he had accepted her terms, which were, become human, become healed, become honest. At the end, he wrote Asha a letter and gave it to Lada to deliver. It was the kind of letter men write when they are ashamed of having once been made of iron. It said, "You told me you can make a body that forgot, listen. You made a life that had gone deaf to itself, here. I could not free your father. It is good that I could not, because when he walked out a free man, it was not because favors had been swapped, but because truth had put its hand on his shoulder. That is the only hand I trust. When I stood, I felt the world laugh and then go quiet. There are silences that feel like surrender, and there are silences that feel like 1,000 candles being lit at once. You gave me the second kind. If I ever sit again and cannot rise, it will not be because I am broken. It will be because I have chosen to listen. Remind me." He signed it and sealed it with the small, ridiculous peacock sticker Sonia had given him as a joke. He felt the peel and press of it, a private triumph. He went home slow, not because he had to, but because he had decided that each step was the smallest possible version of justice. A thing done not once for the crowd, but every day, even when there was no one to laugh, no one to watch, only a man and his foot and the metronome of his heart.